The pastor greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes kind and trusting. "How can I help you, my child?" he asked, his voice soft and welcoming. Star took a deep breath, her gaze meeting his. "I've been struggling with my faith, Pastor," she said, her voice laced with vulnerability. "I need your guidance. I need to understand what's missing in my life." The pastor leaned forward, his eyes filled with compassion. He began to offer her words of comfort, explaining the importance of faith. But Star's mind was elsewhere. She was focused on the five star above his head, glowing brighter with every word he spoke. She smiled inwardly. This was it. Over the next few days, Star returned to the pastor's office, each time growing closer to him. She made sure to dress in ways that caught his eyes, to speak in soft, soothing tone that drew him in. Her beauty, her presence, everything about her was designed to disarm him. And finally, on a night when the stars above were especially bright, Star succeeded. She seduced the pastor, using everything she had learned, everything she knew would bring him to her. And when the night came to an end, she wiped herself clean with a white handkerchief, the same way she had done with Afro Legend and other victims. But this time, she knew that the pastor's stars too were hers to take. She didn't need to look back. The pastor would never know what had truly happened. As for Star, she walked away with more than just another conquest. She had stolen the five stars that had once belonged to the man who had helped guide others. With each passing day, her power grew. The star now shining within her were more than just a symbol of her success. They were a mark of the darkness she had embraced. And with every new target, every new victim, Star knew that nothing would stop her from claiming what she believed was hers. The world would never know what was truly happening in the shadows, but Star did, and she was ready for whatever come next. Pastor Gideon had once been a beacon of hope, the kind of leader who had moved mountains with his words. His sermons were full of passion, his faith unshakable. He had built a church from the ground up, guiding his congregation with the wisdom of the scriptures and the promises of salvation. People reverenced him. To many, he was more than just a pastor. He was a symbol of purity, strength, and spiritual authority. But all that changed after the night with Star. At first, it was easy to ignore. He tried to tell himself that the strange feeling, the nagging sense of guilt, were just a phase. But with each passing day, something in him shifted. The vibrant energy he once had, the clarity of his mission, began to fade. He became restless, his mind consumed with a hunger he couldn't explain. Star had seduced him, but what she had stolen from him was far more than his willpower. She had taken the very essence of his authority, the star that once crowned him with divine favor. And what he didn't know was that her power was now growing inside him, twisting his heart, his desire, and his soul. The first time it happened, Gideon had been counseling one of his female church members. She had come to him for help, her eyes filled with tears, and her heart heavy with pain. He had always been the pillar of support, the man she turned to in times of trouble. But that night, something felt different. His mind wasn't on her problems, it was on her, on the way her body moved as she spoke, the way her voice trembled with emotion. Before he could realize what was happening, he had crossed a line. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse of judgment, but it didn't stop there. The guilt he had felt after the encounter soon faded into something else. Desire. He couldn't explain it, but it was as though he had awoken something inside him that he couldn't control. A hunger that grew with every passing day. He started to sleep with more and more of his members, drawn by the power he felt in those forbidden encounters. Each night it was the same. He would close his eyes, knowing that what he was doing was wrong, but unable to stop. He would ask for forgiveness, but still go back to the same. It wasn't long before his action began to catch up with him. One evening, a fellow church member, a man who had been one of Gideon's closest supporters, came to him with a confession. His voice trembled as he spoke, his face pale with fear. Pastor, my wife, she she has been she has been with you. Gideon froze, his blood running cold. The realization hit him like a slap to his face. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. He had slept with the wife of one of his most trusted members, someone who had stood by him through thick and thin. The man's voice cracked as he continued. I know everything, Pastor. The rumors, the whispers. I saw you with her, and I won't let this go. You've broken more than just my trust. You've betrayed the entire church. Gideon stood there, motionless. His heart pounded in his chest. And for the first time in years, he felt truly afraid. The weight of his sin, the consequences of his action, crashed down on him. The news spread quickly, faster than he could control it. His once loyal congregation, the people who had looked up to him as a spiritual leader, now turned against him. They were angry, furious. How could their pastor, the man who had preached purity and righteousness, betray them so horribly? The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a spiritual crisis for the entire church. The congregation was left in shock, reeling from the revelation. The scandal rocked the foundation of the church that Pastor Gideon had worked so hard to build. As the mob grew angrier, the once powerful man found himself cornered. The whisper turned into shout, and the shout turned into chaos. The people who had once followed him now screamed at him, their rage blinding any sense of reason. They dragged him out into the street, the same street where he had once preached, where he had once stood as a pillar of faith. But now there was no reverence in their eyes, no respect, only anger. The crowd gathered quickly, and the chant grew louder, their fury palpable. Traitor, they screamed, hypocrite, liar, rapist. Some of them threw stones first, small sharp stones that bounced off his body. Others joined in, their fists clenched in rage, their voice trembling with disgust. The sound of the crowd was deafening, drowning out all of Gideon's pleas for mercy, for forgiveness. It was over. The man who had once been the spiritual leader of hundreds was stoned to death in the very place he had preached salvation. His lifeless body was left in the street, a grim reminder of how the mighty had fallen. The church, once a thriving hub of faith, now stood empty. The walls that had echoed with the sounds of worship were now silent. His congregation, the very people he had built his empire on, were scattered, some in grief, some in anger, all betrayed by the man they had trusted. The church was abandoned, its door locked and its window boarded up, a ghostly shell of what it had once been. Pastor Gideon's fall from grace wasn't just the loss of a man, it was the loss of an entire community faith. His sin had caused not just his own destruction, but the destruction of everything he had built. And as the wind blew through the empty church, it carried with it the echoes of a man who had once been reverenced, now nothing more than a cautionary tale. Star, meanwhile, watched from the shadows. She had completed another mission, but the cost of her ambition weighed heavily on her. Another star, another soul taken, another man destroyed. And so Star Journey continued. With more men to target, more stars to steal, she was moving closer to her ultimate goal. But with each step, the darkness that had begun to creep into her heart grew stronger. How long before it consumes her entirely? Only time would tell. As Star continued on her journey, each stolen star became a symbol of her growing power. She had already claimed the stars of powerful men in Lagos, men who had once held immense influence and wealth, men who had built empires with their bare hands, men whose destiny were written in the stars. The weight of each star she took from them was immense, but the darkness it sowed within her heart only grew stronger. Her power took her far beyond the city she had once called home. The stars, it seemed, were not bound by borders or barriers. As her power grew, so did her ambition. Men from all over the world began to fall victim to her, each one more powerful, more influential, and more dangerous than the last. Her first target outside of Lagos was a wealthy businessman from the Middle East. His name was Umar al Basir, a man who had built a massive real estate empire in Dubai. He was respected in the business world, a man whose vision and drives had turned him into a billionaire. But to Star, he was nothing more than another star to be claimed. She had met him at a global summit, a conference where the world's wealthiest and most powerful men gathered. Umar was charismatic, his confidence radiating from every word he spoke. Star played her part perfectly, blending into the crowd of dignitaries, her eyes never leaving him. She could see it immediately, the six stars above his head, each one glowing with potential, each one representing a different facet of his extraordinary life. It wasn't long before Umar became enchanted by her. She was beautiful, captivating, and her aura seemed to draw him in like a moth to a flame. She seduced him, as she had done with so many before, using her beauty and charm to lure him into her web. That night she stole his stars, one by one, quietly, without a sound. The energy of his power flowed into her, and as she wiped herself clean with a wet handkerchief, she knew the price of his power was steep, but it would take her to even greater heights. Umar's empire crumbled shortly after. His business deals fell apart, his investments went sour, and his reputation tarnished. He lost everything. His name, once synonymous with success, became a whisper of failure. No one knew the real reason behind his fall, except for Star, who moved on to the next target, a politician from Europe. This man, known as Charles DuPont, had six stars shining brightly above his head, each one representing a different strength. His political influence, his wealth, his charisma, his intelligence, his leadership, and his unshakable belief in the vision for the future. Charles was one of the most powerful men in Europe, and the world had no idea how fragile his position truly was. Star infiltrated his life, posing as a journalist eager to learn from him. She followed him around for weeks, studying his every move. She saw the cracks in his armor, the stress from trying to juggle his political ambition with his personal life. She took advantage of his vulnerability, using her charm to seduce him. During a trip to Paris, she stole his stars as they spent the night together, her eyes never leaving his. She had learned to take without leaving a trace, to drain him of his power without him ever knowing what had happened. Soon after their affairs, Charles' political career began to unravel. His public image shattered as corruption scandals surfaced. His once loyal supporters turned against him, and his influence in the political world diminished rapidly. The stars she had stolen from him were now hers to claim, and his fall was complete. As that list of victims grew, so did her hunger for more. She moved across continents, to America, to Asia, to Africa, targeting the richest and the most powerful men she could find. Each time she took a star, the darkness inside her grew, and with it her ability to manipulate and control. She has stolen the stars of men of all races, black, white, Arabs, Asians, and she took pride in the fact that no man, regardless of his background or achievement, was safe from her reach. Her next victim was a tech mogul from Silicon Valley, Michael Abrams. His genius has turned a small setup into one of the most successful tech companies in the world. He was a visionary, with five stars above his head, representing his innovation, his wealth, his intellect, his leadership, and his ability to predict the future of technology. Star seduced him during a business trip, using her charm to get close to him. She took his stars in the quiet of his hotel room, feeling the power of his intellect and vision flowing through her as she wiped herself clean, leaving no trace behind. Michael's company collapsed after her encounter with him. His once revolutionary ideas were copied by competitors. His investors pulled out, and his innovation was overshadowed by the very people he had inspired. He disappeared from the public eyes, his legacy tarnished, while star power continued to grow. At this point, Star had stolen the stars of 96 men. Each man had at least five stars, and some had six. Each one had represented a facet of their destiny, a gift that made them unique and powerful. But with each star she took, a part of her humanity was lost. The price of ambition was high. Star could feel the cost in her bones. But it didn't matter. The hunger for power, for control, was all consuming. As Star reached the 96th man, she knew she was close to the end of her journey. Only four men stood in her way, and with each one, the star she stole would bring her closer to the ultimate prize. The world was her playground, and the power she has accumulated was almost limitless. But with power came the inevitable question: what would she do once she had it all? Would she be satisfied with the stars of 100 men, or would the darkness inside her continue to grow, demanding more?